While the convicted were learning to adapt to their new lives in prison, the kids who had testified against them slowly began to admit what really happened behind closed doors with investigators.
I remember telling them no for about 4 hours, and I was just tired. I just wanted to go home, so I said what they wanted me to say.
I told them what they wanted me to tell them, you know. Well, they said that if I don't say that something happened, that this terrible man who's done this to all these people is going to be doing it to more kids, and that I needed to do that, you know. I need to help them. That's just the way they asked the questions over and over and over until you finally just said what they wanted to hear, and they were done. They were happy with it. That's basically the only time I ever said anything had happened is when I had to for them, or they weren't going to leave me alone. They asked the same questions, and if I kept saying no, they said, you know, you got to tell us the truth, Victor. You know, you don't want to lose your parents, do you? You know, you don't want to, you know, something bad happen. They made me do it. So I was intimidated, I was scared. You know, we'd sit down first, they'd get the little puppets out with all the anatomically correct puppets and tell us what had happened. We're like, nothing. You know, sit there and, gosh, they hated that. They hated when we said nothing happened. Eventually, we figured out, you know, and, oh, well, he did that, you know. Oh, that sounds terrible, you know. Oh, made the people, counselors happy, you know. All of a sudden, they're ecstatic because we showed them something that was awful with these puppets.
They promised me that nobody would get in trouble or go to prison.
When we call you to the stand, this is what you're going to say. You know, they'd ask me the same questions, and like, yes, and no, and yes. You can tell it was like a Mad Lib story. With all the kids, almost the same. They didn't really change much up. I told like counselors and teachers and everybody, a lot of authority figures, which didn't give me any help whatsoever. Ever since John went to jail, I was always scared, you know, because I knew that I lied, and they told me to lie, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do.
Family members of the convicted were trying to prove this kind of coercion was going on. They formed a group called Victims of Child Abuse Legislation, or VOCAL.
They're leading these kids into saying what they're saying. And then there are some, from some of the reports that VOCAL has received, that are just out there for convictions only, and they don't care what they have to do to get those convictions.
If you're just simply going to refuse to believe that the suspect could have done it, that you're this relative of yours, and that's to say the cops brainwashed the kids. They have relatives whom they simply can't believe did it.
In that garage, along with the medical reports, was a long cassette tape.
On it was a recording of law enforcement and a social worker essentially interrogating a child. And it demonstrated many of the inappropriate techniques.
That's how Modal got out, tape. Just what everybody said they were doing to the kids was on that tape.
Did that happen before they tied you down, or after, or do you remember?
What if they just took it on the bed and just couldn't find me out?
This tape was proof of what the Attorney General's office wrote about in its report 14 years earlier.
In a sense, the investigators really telling the children what happened, and the children saying yes or whatever, and being sort of led into statements rather than say what happened, did anything happen?
The last time that it happened was in summer of '83, Grandma's house in Cottonwood. The time before that, when was it? Was it like weeks or days?
I asked you before, you told me that it happened a lot of times, happened off and on all the time, between the first time it started in 1980 until summer of '83. And you told me that, remember how frequently you said it would happen? You said not every week, but how often about? Once a month. Not once a month.
After hearing the tape recording of Jeff Modal's daughter, the judge freed him.
Not long after we decided we would look into the case, we spoke with the boys, now young men, and that was completely compelling. To speak with them and hear their story about what had happened to them was, it was overwhelming to us that we knew we now had to pursue this case, for John and for them.
I was relieved once I talked to him. And I guess there was some correspondence between me and John. And he's like, hey, everything's cool, I know, and he wasn't blaming me for stuff, because I felt like really guilty. Like there's something else I could have done, but I just didn't know what. And I asked so many people, nobody could help, And here comes this Innocence Project. It was like a guardian angel or something.
Each one of them explained how they had been questioned, the pressure that had been put upon them, the fears that they had, the way they felt obligated to say what it was that law enforcement made and the social workers made very clear to them they wanted them to say. And that's why they said it. And they made very clear that nothing had ever happened to them.
That was one of the happiest days of my life, I think. When I seen that on TV when you walked out. There was nothing better than that. I was happy. Like somebody let this huge weight off of me.
Today, as they start their own families, the children are still struggling to live normal lives.
I carry a lot of guilt. It's been hard.
It's really complicated, and it's frustrating to sort out the emotions.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them do a lot of drugs and alcohol just trying to escape from something. I don't know, they can't forgive themselves. I know it's had a lasting effect on them.
If this would have never happened, first of all, I would have never even attempted a drug. I would have never even thought of a drug.
Where'd you get that storybook, Jonathan? The storybook? Yeah. Oh, here, you want the big one?
While Carla Modal's father, Jeff, was in prison, she attempted suicide more than once.
Brandon, our oldest son, feels guilty to this day because of us going to prison and our family's going through this, and we tried to convince him. He was only a kid, and they molded and pushed him and forced him to say what he said, and we don't blame him.
I'm mad at the court system, and I'm mad at the people for not catching it, and I'm mad at the counselors for reinstilling all these things and telling me I was in denial as opposed to saying, well, maybe you weren't,
Despise is a big word. That's a hard word. I think despise is a much harsher word than hate. And that's the way I feel about authority figures in big respect.
They took my innocence. I felt raped by them, basically. I didn't even know none of this stuff. I didn't know kids were being molested. I didn't have any clues to any of that stuff. So, basically, they threw all that stuff in my head, all the details and all that stuff.
I definitely don't do well with officials. Anybody who works for the state or the county or all those kind of people, I have this inherent distrust for. And the worst part is I know what it comes from and I can't turn it off.
I didn't bathe my daughter for the first year, and I didn't know, you know what I mean? And it wasn't until the trial reopened and stuff that I realized, hey, there's some characteristics. I shouldn't be afraid to be around other people's kids.
Think about it, all those people. Now all those children that are just confused and upset and afraid of their own kids. And And they ruined a lot of people's lives. They really did. I have a son, and I never got to, give him a bath. I would have my mom bathe him because I didn't want people to say, oh, you touched him the wrong way. Because they knew that I didn't want to be in John's shoes for something that, it's not true.
Unfortunately, they are victims, but they're just victims of this county and the way they tried to make themselves so powerful and noticeable.
There was